Gemini, someone is playing with your confidence, but the universe will intervene. Gemini, has your mind been buzzing with thoughts you can't explain lately? That feeling that someone around you is saying all the right words, but their energy doesn't match? You try to shrug it off, analyze it away, maybe even joke about it. But deep down, something doesn't feel right. What if I told you that your intuition is spot on, and that the universe is about to confirm what you've been sensing all along? I'm Elizabeth, your guide here at Esoteric Wisdom. And this message is not just a warning, it's a turning point. Because Gemini, someone close to you is quietly undermining your confidence. Not in obvious ways. It's subtle, a delayed compliment, a question that plants doubt, a pattern of small remarks that make you second-guess what you know in your bones to be true. But here's the good news. The universe is watching, and it's preparing to intervene in a way that will be impossible to ignore. If you felt emotionally drained after certain conversations or noticed that your natural brightness dims around specific people, this isn't paranoia. It's perception. Your mind may race with scenarios, but your spirit already knows the truth. This is your wake-up call to trust that truth. Stay with me to the end, because what's coming is not just clarity, it's liberation. Chapter 1. The game behind the compliment. Gemini, you've always had the gift of words, and you're used to hearing them from others too. But lately, some compliments haven't felt clean. Maybe it was praise that left a bitter aftertaste, or encouragement that somehow stirred doubt instead of confidence. You sensed the shift, but your logical mind tried to brush it aside. They didn't mean anything by it. I'm just overthinking. Except you're not. Because the truth is, someone around you has been playing a quiet game. A psychological dance designed not to destroy you, but to dilute you. To blur the sharp edges of your insight. To make you second-guess the very gifts that make you magnetic. And they do it not with insults, but with subtlety. That's what makes it so insidious. As a Gemini ruled by Mercury, you live in the world of nuance. You pick up on tone, timing, rhythm. You notice pauses others miss, the slight tightening in someone's voice, the way their energy flickers when you speak your truth. Your mind processes so quickly that others often assume you're always confident. But your sensitivity is deep, and when something doesn't sit right, your body tells you long before your brain catches up. This person, whoever they are, has likely learned to mask manipulation in admiration. They might call you brilliant, then point out how you talk too much. They might marvel at your versatility, then ask why you can't seem to stick to one thing. They say they admire your light, but somehow, you feel dimmer around them. Let me tell you about Clara, a Gemini artist in her mid-50s. Her best friend of 20 years always cheered her on, until Clara started sharing her work publicly. Suddenly, her friend's support turned passive-aggressive. "That's bold of you," she'd say. "Are you sure people will understand your message?" At first, Clara shrugged it off. But the more she succeeded, the more distant her friend became. It took Clara years to realize her confidence wasn't being nurtured, it was being managed. Gemini, this is a wake-up call. Because the universe is aligning Mercury with Chiron, the wounded healer. This is a potent combination, one that brings psychological clarity. It peels back the layers and forces us to confront what's been whispered beneath the surface. You might receive a text meant for someone else, hear your name mentioned when you weren't supposed to, or finally connect dots between events you thought were unrelated. These aren't coincidences. They're divine breadcrumbs, guiding you back to trust yourself. Ask yourself, who do I feel less like myself around? Whose support feels conditional? Who praises me only when I'm not shining too brightly? Because this chapter in your life is about reclaiming your light and refusing to dim it just to preserve a connection that thrives on your confusion. There's something else you need to know, Gemini. Manipulation doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from insecurity. The person who's been undermining you may not be consciously trying to hurt you. They may simply be unable to handle your expansion. Your brilliance threatens the version of themselves they've clung to. And rather than rise with you, they try to tether you. But you are not made to be tethered. You are the sign of movement, of curiosity, of growth. Anyone who tries to slow your wings under the guise of care is not loving you, They are limiting you.
So what now?
Start by honoring your perception. Revisit the conversations that left you confused or heavy. Listen not just to what was said, but to what your body felt in the moment. Begin separating genuine feedback from manipulative suggestion. And remember, your doubt didn't come from nowhere. It was placed there, but it doesn't belong to you. Gemini, your confidence is not arrogance. Your clarity is not rebellion. Your shine is not a threat to those who love you. It's a gift. If someone makes you feel like you need to tone down your truth just to keep the peace, that is not peace. That is control dressed in charm. And the universe? It's not going to let this go on much longer. Because you're about to be shown something undeniable. A misstep. A slip. A moment of truth so sharp, even your most diplomatic side won't be able to ignore it. And when that happens, your only job is to believe yourself. You're not overreacting. You're not being dramatic. You're awakening. And once your eyes are open, Gemini, there's no going back. Chapter 2. When trust feels like a trap. Gemini, trust has always been a paradox for you. You trust quickly, sometimes too quickly, because your mind is wired to connect. You see potential in people. You hear their words and often assume good intent, even when the tone tells a different story. You want to believe the best because you need to believe there's something worth discovering beneath the surface. But here's the truth. Sometimes, what looks like trust is actually a cleverly disguised trap. You're not naive. You're perceptive. But when the lines between perception and people-pleasing blur, you can find yourself caught in emotional dynamics where your loyalty is being used against you. This chapter is about recognizing those dynamics and stepping out of them with your power intact. Let's talk about the emotional pattern at play. Mercury, your ruling planet, is currently in tension with Neptune, the master of illusion. This cosmic energy creates fog in your relationships. It clouds communication, veils intention, and heightens your tendency to over-intellectualize feelings that are meant to be trusted in the body. Your intuition knows. Your nervous system knows. But your mind tries to find the right words, the better angle, the excuse that softens the blow. Gemini, you can't logic your way through betrayal. Let me introduce Ethan, a Gemini writer who once told me, "I don't think I've been manipulated. I think I've just misunderstood them." But over time, his inner world began to crumble. His writing dried up. His creativity dulled. And one night, while reading through old emails, he realized just how often his colleague had subtly undermined his confidence. "You're so talented, but maybe stay in your lane for this one. I don't think your voice suits this kind of project." It wasn't overt. It wasn't cruel. But it was consistent. It wasn't about advice. It was about containment. That's what makes it a trap, Gemini. Because the person who's playing with your confidence doesn't want to destroy you. They want you to stay just inspired enough to keep them close, but never so empowered that you realize you don't need them. And here's the most painful part, they often wrap that control in care. "I'm just looking out for you. You're overthinking this. I only want the best for you." But what they really want is access to your gifts, your mind, your glow. This is the moment when trust becomes dangerous, not because you trusted someone else, but because you stopped trusting yourself. You began editing your thoughts before speaking, diluting your ideas before sharing, dismissing your gut feelings in favor of keeping the peace. And peace kept under manipulation isn't peace at all. It's a prison. You're not here to shrink yourself so others feel safe. You're not here to be second-guessed by those who claim to support you. You're here to evolve, and not everyone gets to come with you. The astrology supports this. Mercury's dance with Pluto in the weeks ahead will peel away illusions. You'll hear things you weren't supposed to. You'll pick up on energy shifts in rooms you once felt comfortable in. The smiles won't feel the same. The praise will start to ring hollow. And you'll face a decision. Will you continue to give the benefit of the doubt, or will you begin to give yourself the benefit of truth? That's the turning point. Because the longer you wait for proof, the longer you delay your alignment. And Gemini, you are too gifted, too needed, and too awake to keep sitting at tables where your growth makes others uncomfortable. This person, whoever they are, may be close. A friend, a partner, a sibling, even a mentor. But proximity is not proof of purity. Just because someone has walked beside you doesn't mean they want you to walk ahead of them. So, here's your spiritual prescription. Start trusting the first signal. Start tracking how your body feels after every interaction. Start speaking your truth without softening it to protect someone else's ego. Start letting silence stretch when someone tries to wrap their manipulation in sugar. And most importantly, start remembering who you were before they made you question your brilliance. Gemini, this is not just about clearing one relationship. This is about clearing the entire frequency of false loyalty from your life. You don't owe anyone continued access to you just because they've known a version of you. The real you, the unfiltered, expansive, radiant you, is not a liability. They just don't know how to stand next to it. But that's not your problem. Your only job now is to honor what you feel, speak what you know, and walk away from anything that asks you to betray your clarity for the sake of being liked. Because when trust feels like a trap, the only honest act is freedom. Chapter 3. The mirror never lies, but it can be manipulated. Gemini, let's talk about the mirror. Not the literal one, the metaphorical mirror you hold up to others, and, more importantly, the one you hold up to yourself. You've always had a gift for reflection. You can see someone's motivations, insecurities, and desires often before they're aware of them. That's part of your Mercury magic. Your mind reflects and refracts reality like a prism. But what happens when the mirror you're looking into has been tilted, subtly distorted by someone you've trusted? You start seeing a version of yourself that isn't whole. That's not confidence, it's control. And it's been happening slowly, quietly, over time. This chapter is about how someone in your life has learned to bend the mirror, not to shatter you, but to shape you into something that serves them better. Someone who pretends to reflect back your greatness, but is actually dimming the light just slightly enough that you begin to question what you see. It begins with small things. A pause before a compliment. A raised eyebrow when you share an idea. A laugh that doesn't match the spirit of your joke. Individually, they seem harmless. Together, they create a web of confusion, a Gemini's least favorite state. You start over-explaining yourself. You second-guess your emotions. You become obsessed with understanding them, when all along, the message was in the energy, not the logic. That's the trap. Let me tell you about Vanessa, a Gemini consultant in her early 40s. She'd built a reputation for her insight, her speed, and her charm. Her business partner adored her, but only when she stayed behind the scenes. Every time Vanessa wanted to step forward, whether on social media or in key meetings, her partner would offer feedback that made her feel unready, unworthy, or just a little too much. "You shine so bright," he'd say. "Just don't burn the room." She took that as care, but it was fear. His fear, not hers. Eventually, Vanessa realized that he wasn't a mirror, he was a filter. One that distorted her reflection just enough to keep her dependent. Gemini, this is what the universe is trying to show you right now. Pluto is working behind the scenes, pressing gently on your self-perception. And as Mercury, your ruler, forms rare angles with Saturn and Neptune, it's revealing where you've been conditioned to see yourself through someone else's distortion. You think you're scattered, but maybe you've been told that by someone who fears your multifaceted power. You think you're inconsistent, but maybe your flexibility just scares people who live in boxes. You think you're too much? No, Gemini. You're just finally seeing clearly. This manipulation isn't always conscious, but its effects are real. You start asking for permission to be yourself. You rehearse conversations in your mind just to make sure your tone is okay. You water down your excitement so you're not mocked for being extra. And slowly, bit by bit, you abandon the very essence of who you are. Not anymore. This moment in your life is sacred, because the mirror is cracking, but it's not breaking you. It's revealing you, the real you, the one you were before the world told you to behave, before someone else's insecurity became your self-doubt. And with that revelation comes power. It's not about calling the manipulator out. It's about calling yourself back in. Call back the version of you who didn't second-guess her voice. Call back the Gemini who could speak, shift, evolve without shame. Call back your confidence, not as a performance, but as a birthright. So what can you do right now? Start journaling how you feel after spending time with different people. Ask yourself, do I feel expanded or contracted? When someone compliments you, observe how your body responds. Do you feel nourished or unsettled? Begin to reclaim your reflection by owning your truth, especially when it's inconvenient. Speak the thought that feels risky. Post the idea that feels like you, not the one that sounds safe. Because the safest thing you can do right now is be honest. Honest about who you've become to keep the peace. Honest about the parts of yourself you've tucked away for the sake of balance. Honest about the fact that you no longer want to play small just to fit someone else's frame. Gemini, the mirror is clearing. The distortion is lifting. And what you're about to see is breathtaking. Not because you've become someone new, but because you're finally remembering who you've always been. And no one, not even someone you once loved, gets to bend that light again. Chapter 4. The universe doesn't whisper forever. Gemini, for a while now, the universe has been speaking to you in soft nudges, in unshakable feelings, in dreams that linger longer than usual, in the heaviness you feel around certain people, and the lightness that returns when they leave. But you, true to your dual nature, have tried to reason with it. You've played both sides. You've waited for more evidence, more clarity, more time. But the universe doesn't whisper forever. There comes a moment when the whispers turn into signs too loud to ignore, when life stops being subtle and starts being surgical. And Gemini, you're stepping into that moment now. This is the chapter where truth can no longer be intellectualized away, where your inner knowing finally overrides your outer tolerance, where you begin to honor what you feel first before running it through the filter of politeness or social expectation. The cosmic setup is precise. Mercury, your ruling planet, is aligning with Mars. This is a call to speak, not just think, to act, not just observe, to draw a line, not just imagine one. You may already sense it, a growing tension with someone who once felt close. The trust has been thinning. The energy feels off. The conversations don't flow the same. And while they still say all the right things, something in you knows. This isn't about blame. It's about recognition. The recognition that someone has been slowly replacing your inner compass with their agenda. They haven't silenced you directly, but they've planted just enough seeds of doubt to make you question your direction. And as a Gemini, when you question your direction, you stall your momentum. You overthink. You fragment. And that's when your light dims. But not anymore. Because what's coming is a moment that will make everything clear. It might be a conversation, a message, a mistake. Something you weren't meant to see, but needed to. And when it arrives, it won't bring confusion. It will bring confirmation. Let me tell you about Lamar, a Gemini entrepreneur. For years, his cousin managed his small business. She was efficient, supportive, and full of encouragement until he began expanding. New clients, national press, real growth. That's when the compliments turned into jokes. Don't forget us, little people. You're really pushing it now, huh? He laughed along until one day, he opened an email she accidentally copied him into. It wasn't cruel, but it was clear. She didn't believe in his vision. She was subtly sabotaging his steps. The universe had stopped whispering. It handed him truth on paper. Lamar didn't react with rage. He responded with clarity. He made changes. He didn't argue or justify. He just adjusted. And that's what this chapter is really about, Gemini. Not confrontation, but correction. Not revenge, but realignment. When the truth comes, you'll have a choice: to fall back into the comfort of doubt, or to step forward into the strength of your knowing. To make space for people who can rise with you, or continue shrinking so others won't feel left behind. But if you've been feeling drained, confused, or creatively blocked, this is your sign. Something or someone has been misaligned with your expansion, and your soul is done accommodating it. Your clarity will not always bring comfort, but it will bring freedom. You may lose relationships, but you will reclaim your reflection. You may disappoint others, but you will finally stop disappointing yourself. So ask yourself now, before the moment arrives, who are you when no one is bending the mirror? Who are you when you stop negotiating your instincts? Who are you when your truth is not edited for someone else's approval? Because that version of you is the one the universe is protecting. The one it's calling home. The one who's been whispering, "It's time," over and over.
You didn't miss the signs, Gemini.
You've been gathering them. And soon, they'll speak in unison. And when they do, listen, respond,
Move.
because when the universe stops whispering, it starts rearranging. And your role isn't to resist. It's to rise. Chapter 5. You were never meant to be small. Gemini, let's speak the truth plainly, because the time for gentle hints is over. You were never meant to be small. Not in your thoughts. Not in your voice. Not in your presence. And yet, somewhere along the way, someone convinced you to fold yourself down into a version that was easier to handle. More agreeable. Less alive. You tried to stay in the room. You tried to make the dynamic work. You gave the benefit of the doubt. Again.
And again.
Until it cost you something that should never have been for sale. Your self-trust. This is the final breaking point. And it's not punishment, it's permission. A sacred reckoning that says, no more. The universe, in its infinite design, only applies this kind of pressure when you've outgrown the container you're still trying to shrink yourself to fit. Mercury, the planet that rules your voice, your thoughts, your identity, is being activated through a karmic lens now. Which means any place in your life where you've been performing instead of expressing, adapting instead of expanding, or compromising instead of creating, will be revealed. And when it is, you'll feel it in your bones. Your restlessness isn't confusion. It's awakening. Your irritability isn't drama. It's resistance to suppression. You are not a puzzle piece. You are the entire constellation. And no relationship, job, friendship, or expectation is worth the cost of your soul's brilliance. Let me tell you about Rachel, a Gemini therapist who spent years in a wellness circle with like-minded practitioners. They praised her insight until she challenged their views. They adored her creativity until she outshone them. They supported her growth until she wanted to lead. And then came the turning point, a retreat where she was asked to tone down her messaging to keep the group's tone safe. She complied for a day. And then, sitting in silence under a tree, she heard her own voice, louder than anyone else's. I didn't come here to echo. I came to evolve. She left the retreat early. Months later, she launched her own practice, centered in truth, not approval. And her life, her work, and her spirit expanded. Gemini, that moment is coming for you, too. Someone has tried to make you forget. Forget your pace, your depth, your vision. They've tried to frame your magic as messy, your insight as scattered, your sensitivity as too much. But you are not too much. You are the exact amount required to shift the atmosphere when truth needs a voice. And yes, your voice will cost you something. It may cost you relationships that only survived when you played smaller than you are. It may cost you the illusion that you need everyone to like you. It may cost you the identity you've clung to just to be digestible. But what you gain is everything. When you speak from your whole self, not just the polished pieces, you begin to magnetize the people, places, and opportunities that match your true frequency. The ones who don't just tolerate your complexity, they celebrate it. You're not here to be understood by the masses. You're here to be remembered by the few who get it. So what now? You stop explaining. You stop apologizing. You stop watering down the medicine in your words so others can sip it comfortably. You choose your expansion over someone else's comfort. You choose truth over performative peace. You choose alignment even if it means walking alone for a while. Because you won't be alone for long. The real ones are coming. The real path is opening. The real power is already here, inside you, under the layers you're shedding now. And when the dust clears, you will see just how much of your life was being held back by a single lie, that being loved required being less. It never did. Gemini, this is your rebirth. Not into someone new, but into the you that was buried beneath all the pleasing, performing, and second-guessing. You were never meant to be small. You were meant to illuminate. And now, finally, nothing and no one can stop that light from rising. Conclusion. Gemini, your light will never need permission again. Gemini, After all the shifting, the second-guessing, the whispers of doubt, and the storm of emotions, you now stand at the threshold of something sacred. Clarity. Not the kind handed to you by others. The kind that rises from within when you finally stop asking, "Is it just me?" and start affirming, "Yes, it's me. And I see clearly now." The games are over. The subtle manipulations?
Exposed.
The tilted mirrors?
Broken.
What remains is your reflection, unfiltered, unapologetic, whole. You no longer need to justify your instincts, downplay your brightness, or seek validation in eyes that never truly saw you. Because what you've reclaimed is not just your voice, it's your vision. You are no longer the Gemini who waits for signs that it's okay to speak, to lead, to trust yourself. You've become the one who is the sign for others. And as you move forward, you'll notice the shift, the ease in your chest, the lightness in your step, the silence inside that no longer feels like doubt but like peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer pretending. So, let this be your beginning. Let it be the moment you stopped hiding your complexity and started living your completeness. Let it be the season where you chose alignment over approval, intuition over performance, and truth over illusion. And if this message touched something inside you, don't keep it in silence. Your voice matters. Your insight heals. Your story can be the permission someone else is waiting for. Now tell me, what are you no longer willing to silence? What part of you is finally ready to be seen? Because the universe isn't whispering anymore, Gemini. It's watching, cheering, guiding, and most of all, it's mirroring back the power you almost forgot was yours all along.